Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Reads podcast, the show where I'll talk about books and only books and everything book related. Today, I am joined by Mr. Doug Johnston. Doug is a former corporate executive, testifying expert, and world champion sailor, and over a multi-decade career spanning banking, private equity, and litigation consulting, he developed a sustained interest in language, motivation, and emotional definition. His book, Choosing Emotions, represents 9 years of research across disciplines and traditions. And today he's here. He's going to share a little bit more about the backstory behind this book that he has come out with and kind of just hear a lot about the backstory behind it and a lot of the research he's found. So, Doug, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast today. Really looking forward to chatting with you and welcome to Southern Reads.
Hey, thank you for the welcome. Good to be with you, Noah.
So I have been really looking forward to this because I love this kind of thing for this book. So, for people that don't know, tell them a little bit about kind of how you kind of led up to you writing about choosing emotions and what kind of led you to write a book full of emotions.
You bet. Well, this may be the most entertaining dictionary of all time. In fact, we even call it an emotionary, which is sort of a new creation, but it amounts to 9 years worth of research. And it was, like many books, an accident. I was a professional researcher, as you mentioned. I've been hired by a number of companies and elite law firms to help them research complex scenes. When my daughter was in eighth grade, this is now 10 years ago, we had started a game. Instead of my simply giving her an allowance, I would make her earn it. So I would bring a list of 250 questions to a father-daughter dinner. She got to pick the restaurant, and the questions could be about anything, history, music, religion, uh, current events, you name it, science, math. She loved it. And every time she got a question correct, I would slide a $2 bill across the table. So it became a big hit. I mean, instead of me reaching out to my teenage daughter, she would call me, gee, Dad, we called the game College Bowl. Can we play that again? One night when she was in 10th grade, she came to dinner with sort of a long face and she said, Dad, can I ask the questions tonight? And I said, sure. And she said, what do you know about depression? And I faked it. No, I acted like she was talking about economic depression. And she said, no, 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 not business depression. I'm talking about emotional depression. And no, I was a deer in headlights. I didn't know what to say. And I said, sweetheart, I'm sorry. I'm just not, I don't have any answers for you, but I'm going to put on my research cap and dig into it. So she had been out of school with an athletic injury and an unrelated surgery for a month. So she was experiencing something she'd never experienced before. And like any teenager, probably thought it would go on forever. So here I am back in my office, surrounded days later by books and uh, laptops and articles and you name it. And I came across a quote from uh, a 1950s writer by the name of Rollo May, M-A-Y. That may or may not be a name you know. He was quite famous in the 50s. He had his PhD. He had a bachelor's in divinity, and he was pretty well known in America. One of the first self-help writers before anybody even knew what the term self-help meant. He had survived depression himself. And his quote was, depression is the inability to construct a future. And the moment I read that, I thought, wow, what a powerful quote. You know, that's not sort of a dry scientific explanation of what depression is. It's a quote from somebody who's experienced it. A couple of days after that, I came across a second quote from J.K. Rowling. I'm sure you know who she is. She's the author of the Harry Potter series. And her quote, she too was a depression survivor. Before she became the world's most successful novelist, she had suffered terribly from depression. And her quote about depression is that absence of being able to envision you will ever be cheerful again. It's the most unpleasant thing I've ever experienced. That's what J.K. Rowling said. And then a couple of days after that, I came across a third quote from a freelance writer by the name of Haley Cornell. She's a very talented writer. She also had recovered from depression, and her quote was, depression lies. It tells you you've always felt this way, you always will, but you haven't and you won't. And so there I am sitting at my desk. My daughter is back in class finally across town, and I thought, well, I'll just text these quotes to her. Maybe this will help. And so I pressed send, and 3 minutes later, my daughter was in math class. She probably should have been looking at her cell phone, but she was, and she responded, "I'm crying." Well, my goodness, that's the last thing I expected. And I said, "Why are you crying? These people all survive depression. There's hope." And her response immediately was, "That's why I'm crying. Thank you, Dad." So that was a really sweet and a wonderful father-daughter moment. But what it mostly became was we were onto something. We were onto this issue of how, if you really want to understand an emotion, it's often better to hear from somebody who's experienced it rather than from, a dry scientific viewpoint. So we expanded from, she soon recovered from her depression, but we expanded from depression to anxiety to codependence to empathy to all sorts of good emotions. And we realized that defining an emotion through the quotes of people who've experienced them had never been done before. And then it really took off. Over 9 years, we developed, in my research, 272 different emotional states as defined by what 8,000 quotes in history have said about them. It was a revolution. No one's ever done this before in the field of emotions. If you were to go to Barnes and Noble tomorrow or online to Amazon or Ingram Spark or anywhere else, you would find that a psychologist will typically write a single book about a single emotion, but nobody had ever put them all together. And we didn't even know how many there were. So it's a first of its kind, and it's been extremely well received by both psychologists and normal readers. It was a joy to write.
Yeah, this is technically, as he had mentioned, kind of like a earlier about a dictionary for emotions, and there's 272 emotions that you researched and defined and looked for. Out of all the emotions that you covered, was there one that you were surprised was considered an emotional feeling?
Yes. So, just as way of background, the average person, and no, as you and I both know, nobody's average, but collectively we can talk about averages. The average person thinks that they're, in round strokes, 24 emotions. And yet we've documented 272. These are not high tech or obscure emotions. These are everyday emotions like blushing or confidence or narcissism or bullying or wonder or zeal or silence or provocation or resentment. These are everyday emotions that we all use that we don't necessarily realize we're using because we're sort of in them. But to answer your specific question, the emotion or emotional state that I learned the most about, there are a couple of them, but one of them was trauma. And if you'd asked me a few years back what I knew about trauma, I would have said something, well, it's something to do with an accident and an ambulance and an emergency room. I really wouldn't have had much more attention on it than that. Well, emotion, as it turns out, trauma, as it turns out, is where your emotional system is overwhelmed. So you are either physically or emotionally overwhelmed and your system shuts down. And that's a very, very powerful thing because your emotional system doesn't like being shut down and it prioritizes it. You may have had no friends, acquaintances who have been in terrible accidents or, God forbid, have been raped. People who have been traumatized are often stuck in the episode and they can't quite get their attention off of it. And regular people might say to that person, well, just get over it. It happened and it's over. But trauma isn't quite like that. What the scientists and the psychologists and the neuroscientists all agree is that uh, your system shut down, and until you can put words to what happened, you're going to be stuck there. And so I'm giving you a long answer, but trauma was it was an emotional state that I really didn't understand. And I now understand how remarkably powerful it is to put words to what happened so that you can be freed of the fixation that you have with trauma.
Since coming out with the book, how has the reception for it been so far? And have there been any doctors that have reached out to you asking, or any kind of medical professions about some of the emotions in here?
You bet. So the book's done extremely well on Amazon. It's been in the top 10 in three or four different categories since it came out a few months back. I reached out to a few prominent psychologists, one of whom was a past president of the American Psychological Association. Another has been a prominent professor of psychology at University of Texas. And they each reached back and they said, this is really something that's never been done before, what you've done. And one of them even proposed a side-by-side comparison of my work with some of their work. So it's true that I'm not a licensed psychologist, but I am a highly accomplished researcher. And what I sort of did accidentally had never been done before. I was very, very surprised to find, and this is an important thing to share, Choosing Emotions, my book, is the most comprehensive reference on emotions in the English language. And that is not what I set out to do. I was surprised to learn that. But 9 years of research and 376 pages later, covering 272 emotions, it's never been done before in this way. And in fact, Choosing Emotions, the book, includes in these emotions, 25% of the emotions that I've covered are not at all even included in the dictionaries of the American Psychological Association, which again is quite an amazing fact. I'm not able to hear you at the moment.
I had my microphone muted.
Here we go.
I apologize. I had my
No
microphone
worries.
muted. How does expanding our emotional vocabulary change how we think?
What a beautiful question. So there are a few very prominent psychologists and psychiatrists mentioned in the book. One of them is Lisa Feldman Barrett. She teaches. She's a clinical psychologist and a neuroscientist who teaches at Northeastern University in Boston. She is maybe not a name you know, but she is among the top 0.1% of most often cited scientists in the world. So she is extremely well regarded. In her work, she has sort of summarized it by saying that the more specific you can be with your vocabulary, the words you have, the easier a time you're going to have with emotions. And that's really been landmark work by Lisa Feldman Barrett, the neuroscientist and psychologist in Boston. There is another clinical psychiatrist by the name of Dan Siegel at the UCLA in California. He has spearheaded with a few other researchers work with functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, to highlight that when a person is able to express themselves in words about what they're feeling, that they're calmer. This was landmark work. If you can name what you're feeling, you're going to be calmer. And so he came up with a phrase, Noah, that's one for the ages, which is name it to tame it. If you can put into words the way you're feeling, you're going to be a much happier person, much calmer person. So in my view, kudos to Dr. Siegel, name it to tame it. If you can put it in words, if you can find the vocabulary to express the way you're feeling, you're going to be a happier person. And in fact, that's just sort of what my book happens to be. It's an emotionary or a dictionary to allow you to do that. And if, for example, you think, gee, am I the only person to ever suffer like this? You'd be amazed at the quality of the commentary from thought leaders around the world, all cultures, all faiths, all religion, about how their life was when they suffered. They put it in words. Well, why not take advantage of what some of those great leaders, men, women, all faiths, all genders, all religions have said? Sometimes their words can echo what you're thinking in your mind, and you say, "Well, that's it. That's exactly the way I feel." That person already wrote it down. You get to look at that, and you get to benefit from what other thought leaders have said about a specific emotion before you.
Now, from the emotions that you covered, which one was your most favorite to do research on?
Well, trauma became one, but there's another one that I had not understood or understood well enough, and that was ego. Ego is not an emotion per se, it's an emotional state, but we've all sort of got a general idea about ego. But in layman's terms, in average person's term, ego is you're projecting a personality that isn't the real you. And I don't think that I really quite understood that until I started doing the research. One night, late at night, with my little dog curled at my feet while I was digging into the word ego, I came across a quote from Carl Jung, the Swiss American founder of analytical psychology. He's a brilliant, brilliant man, and he wrote a whole lot, and he wrote in very understandable terms. He wrote about ego that a man spends the first half of his life building up an ego, and the second half of his life understanding how important it is to dismantle his ego. And no, when I read that, I must have read it a dozen times because I myself, I just didn't understand ego. I thought it was a good thing. And now I'm realizing through not only Dr. Jung's works, but on a dozen other thought leaders, psychologists, political leaders, people who are really accomplished at what they do, they all said the same thing, that ego is a false you that you put out there to sort of put other people to dismiss them. It's not the real you. And so my life changed when I read that one sentence, and I began to dig into it and realize that I had lived a life full of ego, and I'm ashamed to admit that. But it's never too late to learn. There's another well-known researcher by the name of Eckhart Tolle, whose works have reached over 100 million people. And I was relieved, no, when I came across his quote. He said, well, ego is not a good thing. But the good news is that the moment you realize that you're using an ego, that you're projecting a false self, you're not going to be inclined to do it anymore. And so I was greatly relieved by Eckhart Tolle's comment that the answer to ego is simply realizing that you've been using it and that it's not the real you. So those two words, trauma and ego, really got my attention. But there are a lot of really fun, interesting emotions out there, like charisma, for example, and karma, and empathy, and curiosity, and wonder, and zeal, and enthusiasm. Uh, the world is full of emotions, half of them pretty good and half of them not so good, but they are the way we navigate our lives. That's a really important viewpoint, that it's not at all uncommon for a person to ask themselves, gee, am I wrong to feel this way? No, you're not wrong to feel that way. Emotions are how you navigate life. Emotions keep you away from bad stuff, from anger, from aggressive people, from pain. They navigate you away from bad stuff, and they navigate you toward good stuff: curiosity, love, wonder, excitement, enthusiasm. And the moment you realize really that emotions, all of them, are helpful, they help you navigate your life, suddenly you sort of shift. Suddenly your life becomes a little bit more clear when you think, well, you know what, pain, yeah, if I touch a hot stove, I'm going to withdraw my hand. That's not good. But it's a good thing because it helps you navigate away from bad things and toward good things. So navigation is an important word about emotions. It's prominently featured in the book, and it's certainly state of the art in the psychological and neuroscience world.
Now, when people go to read the book and they learn about all these emotions, what's the overall message or key takeaway that you want people to walk away from when they after they read the book?
What a great question. Everyone has a voice in their head. No question about that. When you're alone in the shower, in your bedroom, in your car, uh, you have a voice in your head. We think in words, and most people only think that they're, a couple of dozen emotions. And then when you ask them, well, gee, you're 272, you use them every day. And they go, my gosh, yes, I can see that. Having words to express yourself is the key to solving problems. So the answer to your specific question is yes, there's a voice in your head. Make friends with the voice in your head. Make friends with your emotions. And what you'll find is that when you are able to express yourself easily. Uh, I'm going to use an example that we all have experienced one way or another. You're pulling onto your freeway and somebody cuts you off, and I doubt would ever do this, but lots of people might raise their finger and express displeasure. I'm being humorous here. Um, uh, it's absolutely fine to say out loud, I don't like what that guy did. I'm getting angry. Well, when you express it, when you make friends with the voice in your head and you say something out loud, I'm getting angry, I'm getting annoyed. Suddenly you're not in the emotion, you're looking at the emotion. And when you're looking at the emotion, you're able to better control it. So, by making friends with the voice in your head, by articulating out loud the way you feel, it's very therapeutic to you. You're not swept up in the emotion like anger. You're actually looking at it. You're going, well, that's something I do. It's not something I am. So articulating the way you feel, putting thoughts to words. I'll say it again, putting thoughts to words is extremely helpful to anyone's emotional well-being.
Now, due to the overall success that you've seen with this book and going forward, are there any other kind of angles or ways that you can do like another dictionary, like maybe instead of doing emotions, you do some kind of other thing that may relate to us, or what's your plans going going
I'll
ahead?
answer. Thank you for that. I'll answer that in a clinical setting. And again, I'm to be really clear, I'm not a licensed psychologist, but I've certainly put in the work, and I know I've spent hours myself in a chair with good psychologists. Good psychologists are worth their weight in gold. But let's imagine for a moment that you and I are a patient, and you're the licensed therapist, and I'm the patient. And so I sit in the chair in your office, and Noah, you say, "Well, Doug, what's troubling you?" I mean, that's what a therapist would, of course, ask. And let's say that I'm nervous, that I've never been in a therapist's office before, that I'm not quite sure how to describe what I'm feeling. And I sort of stammer and I go, well, what's wrong with me? I'm not sure. I'm anxious all the time. That's it. I'm anxious all the time. That's it. It's anxiety. And so you're the therapist and you quickly make a note to yourself, well, Doug is expressing anxiety. And so because you're trained in this hypothetical scene that I've created, you're trained to deal with anxiety in a certain way. But Noah, what if it's not the case that I'm really suffering from anxiety? What if the true reality is that I'm suffering from addiction? And I don't mean drug addiction. It could be addiction to bubblegum. It could be addiction to sports. It could be addiction to anything, because addiction is a phenomenon, right? So the problem there was I didn't have the words, because I was embarrassed or otherwise, to express what I was really feeling. But what if I didn't understand, because I was able to look at a book and look at addiction and see 20 quotes from different people who've experienced addiction as to how they put it into words. And then I turn to the therapist, you, and I say, look at that, number 7 right there. That's exactly the way I feel. That's what my issue is. Well, suddenly the problem is clear to both you, the therapist, and me, the patient, that I may have stumbled and stammered looking for the right words, but if I have the quotes from 20 other people who've experienced it, that can help solve the issue, help put the right facts on the table. So the book is very helpful in a therapist patient scene. It's also very helpful to people who are writing a paper. If you want to know about love, you'd probably want to know what William Shakespeare had to say about it. You might want to know what some of the great poets in the world had to say about it. If you want to know about charisma, which is you can spend a month looking for quotes on charisma and you'll be hard pressed. Well, that's part of what my 9 years of research did. I brought into one book 272 different emotional states that can help you if you are experiencing a problem. It can help you if you're writing a paper. If it can help you if you're preparing a speech. in class and at work, home, or office. Um, it's really, really fun to read. And I added, to be really clear about it, I added many, many funny remarks from people. Um, a friend of mine challenged me. He said, Doug, I bet you can't come up with a quote about grief. Obviously, if somebody has experienced a death in the family, the loss of a friend or a loved one or a pet, they would experience grief. And I said, well, um, let me think on that. And I actually came across a quote about grief that made me laugh, and I'll share it with you. So a man says, I lost my wife, my dog, and my truck, which obviously would be a time of grieving for almost anyone. And he said, I was so low, having lost my wife, my dog, and my truck. I was so low and so down that I felt that I could fly a kite under a rug. Well, I laughed. I mean, who would come up with being so down or depressed or grief stricken that they could fly a kite under a rug? And I thought, you know what? That's actually pretty funny. I shared it with my friend, and he said, you know what? Uh, if you can laugh at an emotion, it doesn't control you. And that's a very, very therapeutic thought. So if you can come up with, as I have in the book and elsewhere, quotes that make you laugh about serious things, suddenly they're not so burdensome. Suddenly they're not so heavy. Um, Humor is a great solvent, and the book is full of laugh out loud quotes from people. You might think that Albert Einstein never suffered. You might think that Leonardo da Vinci never suffered, or that the President of the United States ever suffered. You'd be amazed at what they say about the times they've suffered and what they did about it. And it's very helpful, and it's fun to read.
Well, Doug, I appreciate you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast today to share this wonderful book with me and my audience. For people interested in the book, where can they go to learn more information and where can they go to support you and follow you on your journey?
Awesome question. Thank you so much, Noah. So the name of the book is Choosing Emotions. It's available on Amazon and Ingram Spark, Barnes and Noble, a number of different places. The website is choosingemotions.com. On social media, we're there at Choosing Emotions as the handle, and it is truly, truly a fun book to read. You can read it any 5 minutes or 2 hours. You can pick an emotion and that may be of interest to you or maybe occurring to someone in your world and suddenly get really helpful insights from people before you who've been there.
And I'll put all of his links in the description box below. So just go into the show notes to find links to that. And I will make sure to put clickable links down there as well for that. Feel free to also follow the podcast on the socials. You can reach out to me on Instagram and TikTok at Southern.Reads. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And feel free to also just check out the website, noahspodcasts.com, to learn more about this show as well as the other shows that I do. Feel free to subscribe so you get notified of when new episodes like this come out in the future. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I will see you all in the next episode of Southern Reads.